of owning a cafe, and other heroic deeds, by Beware the Chistero. Chapter 25. Aftermath. Being walked out of the brothel in handcuffs was something he'd anticipated. However, as he was led to one of the waiting police cars, he couldn't help the disappointment he felt when he saw Loud Cloud and Present Mike, both balking and worried, standing there. The sex workers he'd hoped would flee the scene, rounded up by them along with the Johns. Shit. Hey, wait! Lieutenant, Aizawa's son is...
Under caution,
the officious, beagle-headed officer stated when the pros, bless them, tried to wave them down.
You'll be ruthless,
just like everyone else.
But it's okay,
he called the policewoman, opening the door for him momentarily, stopping at the hero's approach.
Could you let Midoriya-san, Dabi, and the others know that Shinzo-san and I are alright?
Yeah, man. The sun-kissed man nodded, whilst the Jedi man hurriedly snatched out his phone.
We'll head over there too, okay? Bakugo-san and some of the friends are standing watch over the cafe as well,
he said, his smile a little wobbly, blinking, his own smile forming. Oh, that was very kind of her, wasn't it? He nodded before sliding into the passenger seat with a sigh, his hands free of cuffs for safety reasons, and because he'd been cooperative, he guessed, reaching for the seatbelt as the lieutenant hopped into the shotgun chair and the woman got behind the wheel. Well, all things considered, this wasn't such a bad ending to the night, was it?
Aizawa Shouta, 21, owner of the Northern Cafe, a fully qualified self-defense instructor, and a level 7 childminder.
Humming in the affirmative, his eyes meeting the senior officers in the rearview mirror as the car pulled away, and they began their journey to the police station.
Someone clearly so intelligent, it strikes me as odd that you'd run into such a dangerous situation,
the older man stated bluntly.
Why in the world didn't you call the police and let us handle the situation? With respect, sir,
he replied courteously, because being polite cost nothing and usually worked in his favor.
The police aren't known for attending emergencies in this area, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe I saw someone wearing an officer's uniform in one of the brothel's rooms.
He shrugged.
All I knew was that this man who called himself Boss-sama wanted to have me abducted and potentially tortured. Knowing that man had one of my friends spurred me into action.
He furthered,
I seized the villain tasked with kidnapping me and approached the situation logically under the assurance that I am legally permitted to use my quirk in the public interest.
He added, their eyes locking.
At the time, I believed that doing what I could in the first instance, and knowing that the local pros would intervene should limit the chance of real lasting harm to Shinzo-san and lessen the time Boss-sama had to act against my establishment and customers.
He mused. Huffing, the man somehow managed to smirk with his dog's jowl.
"You're very astute, young man,"
he praised, his serious expression returning.
"And off the record, I cannot argue with anything you just said."
He grunted.
"I have been recently transferred to this area with a team of people whom I trust, and we have been dismayed by the state of things that we found."
He huffed.
"However, on record, I cannot be seen to condone your actions tonight, as that would set a dangerous precedent,"
he argued.
"The hero system being what it is, we cannot have vigilantes running around being a law unto themselves. I acted within the constraints of the law, sir,"
he cut in, his expression neutral.
"I believe that CCTV within that place will assure you of that."
Blinking, a laugh leaving him, the dark-featured man shook his head ruefully.
"You know what?"
he grinned.
"I wouldn't be surprised about that at all, Aizawa-san."
He chuckled.
"My name is Sugarami Kenji,"
he offered, his arms folding as they continued on their way.
"And as someone who seems to be so well entrenched in this part of Musutafu, I think that you and I could do a lot of good together in the future."
He mused.
"Perhaps when all of this has died down, you wouldn't mind me coming by your establishment for an informal discussion." "Anyone is welcome in my cafe, sir,"
he returned in kind.
"However, if you'd like to come by at a quieter time, I recommend that you visit between 10 and 12.
He offered.
"How to make donuts, though."
And at that grim, their eyes meeting once more in the mirror, Shouta allowed himself to laugh while the other openly guffawed. Having the police on board with what he was trying to do could only be a good thing, surely. After being walked into an interview room, he'd been sat for a good half an hour, alone, a cup of coffee untouched before him in the stark white one-table, two-chaired setup, the cuffs removed from his wrists, and his body, now depleted of adrenaline, poised rigidly in the cheap plastic chair. He tried the coffee, just to be polite, and hadn't taken another sip after the first one. God, how could people drink such acrid, chemical-peppered stuff? He supposed that not everyone could have his fantastic little Italian machine that sat in his cafe, though. His cafe that was being guarded, of all things. He'd have to bake a devil's food cake just for me to get under friends to say thank you, wouldn't he? If he ever got out of this place. This place where the police were probably having a field day trying to go over everything. A place where Kimiko and her fellow victims would be treated like criminals. A place where hopefully Mr. Compress was similarly being detained. Shit. What a night. A night that was already getting on his last nerve as the frightened faces of his kids and the people he'd tried to help flitted across his mind's eye. But what could he do for them now while he was stuck here? Sighing, his eyes once again returning to the clock mounted on the wall, 22:27, Shouta wondered if he should get up and ask for his phone call. God, he hoped that the Tots, Dabi, and Tomra were okay. He hoped that Inko-san didn't mind hosting them for this long if they hadn't gone back to the apartment he and the older teen shared. And most of all, he hoped that Kimiko was alright. He hoped that she'd be released and return to her son. He hoped that...
Aizawa-san.
Blinking, Shouta found his head snapping to the door next to the two-way mirror, his brows rising as Sir Night-Eye walked through the door with the lieutenant, their expressions soft yet grim. Shit. They weren't expressions which wanted to share good news, were they?
"You're frigid," the beagle-headed police officer stated, "and we thank you truly for your patience,"
he added whilst placing a few papers in front of him with a pen. Skim-reading them, he could tell that the papers pardoned him from any wrongdoing and invalidated the caution he'd been placed under.
I'd also like to formally ask you if you'd be willing, at a time of mutual convenience, of course, to potentially offer your services as a self-defense instructor for some of our rookie officers. He pushed. Your sensei in Tokyo and the residents who've come forward speak very highly of you. Residents?
He asked, his eyes still reading, just to be safe. Paperwork was legally binding, after all. The pen in hand.
Ah, yes. We have quite the collection of concerned citizens in the lobby, all demanding to vouch for you and offering to pay for lawyers.
The lieutenant grinned, a sweat drop or two peppering his temple.
All Might himself and Sir Night-Eye, as you can see, are similarly here to show their support.
He managed, whilst the tallest man in the room adjusted his glasses.
Given the circumstances,
he said, those golden eyes glimmering intensely,
we couldn't allow Aizawa-san to be detained for an extended amount of time.
He furthered, before that frown deepening, he placed two beige folders in front of him, slowly trying to take everything in. His customers were here? All Might was similarly wasting his valuable time too, but as illogical as that sounded, he couldn't help the swollen form flooding his chest. Shouta signed his release papers and passed them back to the dog-featured man before giving the pro-hero his full attention.
Sort of senses.
He asked, the warmth he'd felt tinged with concern. He had a funny feeling this had nothing to do with the legendary blonde's birthday cake order. Nodding, the Foresight quirk user opened the first folder, his fingers tapping at various crime scene photos.
We found an arsonist's toolkit and a room set up with a chair bolted to the floor and covered in belted buckles on the lower level of the warehouse, he said carefully. We wholeheartedly believe and have CCTV footage within the brothel to support this. The Tokami Seto, aka Boss-sama, fully intended to cause you great physical harm this evening, he informed him, the words causing Shota's blood to run cold. He had no idea. Similarly, during his interrogation, He tried to claim that you were one of his clients, and that this feud he'd built up between you was to do with an unsettled tab.
He advised, his tone lacquered with disgust.
We, of course, have already found evidence to the contrary, and we have testimonials from 6 people who were employed by this man to counter his false statement.
He relieved. Ah, son of a bitch. How he would have liked to punch him himself.
And based on everything the police have found, including bribes linked to now former officers who have been arrested, I'm very pleased to tell you that he and all of his known associates will be serving a minimum of 20 years in prison, more if the judge reviewing the case feels it's warranted when the trial takes place.
He stated. Well, at least that was something.
However,
steeling himself, his gut twisting at that tone, Shouta couldn't bring himself to look at the hero stood next to him because his eyes had tracked to the other folder. A folder that had a very familiar social services stamp on the front of it.
As you're no doubt aware, sex work is illegal in our country, and in this particular prefecture, it carries a minimum sentence of 10 years.
No! But they're victims.
He cut in hotly, his dark eyes looking from one stoic man to the next.
You saw that place. You saw what those people were being forced to go through. And we have, unfortunately, a great deal of CCTV footage that shows the illegal use of drugs by many of those sex workers. All of the footage shows what can be argued to be consensual use too.
Sugarame interrupted gently, his hands raised in surrender.
According to the law, that adds another 10 to 12 years. That's not right.
He breathed.
It is the law.
The lieutenant sighed, his head shaking lightly.
However, you have my word that all of the people arrested this evening outside of Okami's direct associates, who have their own legal representation, will be given the best legal teams we can offer.
He added before his head inclining to the folder he'd previously been staring at.
However, in the meantime, there is young Shinso Hitoshi to consider.
Sucking in a breath to settle his nerves, Shouta tried to keep his emotions in check.
Shinso Kimiko has asked that you be given full and total guardianship of her child.
Sir Knight, I said gently.
And given your credentials, we can have the process fast-tracked to ensure that he can be placed directly into your custody tonight.
He offered.
Would you be willing to take him?
Of course I will.
He huffed, his hand gripping the pen tightly.
But he should have his mother.
He bit out.
Isn't there anything that can be done for her? Can she be put on parole? I'll employ her, I can, and will be held responsible for, and as well-meaning and chivalrous as that is, Aizawa-san.
Sugarame admitted, his arms folding.
Sadly, there's no denying the evidence of her activities, and unfortunately, Okami and his associates have spoken out against all of the people employed across all 3 brothels.
He sighed.
We have records of payments received along with dates, times, clients served. He continued gruffly, for all of his big talk and sway, that man has been meticulous in his business affairs.
He grunted as though the words put a foul taste in his mouth, gritting his teeth but accepting that at this point the best thing he could do was to care for Hitoshi. The cafe owner gestured at the folders, his tone tired.
Where do I sign?
Walking out into the lobby, his eyes wide and a true smile momentarily tugging his lips, Shouta couldn't help his spirits lift as Sir Night-Eye escorted him through the security gates where Kohaku and many of his regulars, including the pro heroes sidekicks and All Might himself, moved to greet him.
Are you okay?
He never been up so much in his life, and as he was passed along from person to person, he couldn't help apologizing for taking the time and worrying them unnecessarily.
You've got to be kidding. You could have been hurt or worse. Of course we were going to come down here and make sure that you're all right.
Then the 15 of them pouring out and into the tepid night air, the pros had arranged transport for all of them, free of charge. However, the blonde had asked if he
could have the honor of seeing him safely, Shouta-kun.
Nodding his assent, a promise of seeing everyone on Monday. They'd all demanded that he take Sunday off, and that they, through their contacts, many of which he'd helped them to form, would get the word out that the self-defense lessons would be postponed for a week. Waved them off into their taxis and followed the pro to that eyesore of a car. It beat having to walk home at least, but
I really shouldn't be keeping you from your guests, you know,
he told the man. who opened the passenger door for him. God! The pair having waved at Sir Night-Eye, whilst he and his sidekicks got into their own vehicle.
Keep on resisting, you. The few people not getting the pleasure of my company for an hour hardly means anything.
The taller allowed, his well-practiced hands easily shifting the purring car into gear and driving them out of the smaller private parking lot at the back of the station.
I'm only sorry that you didn't call me in the first instance,
He furthered with a bit of a laugh.
I could have been there to assist you sooner.
He mused.
It's not as though I don't appreciate the gesture.
He replied, the weight of Hitoshi's social services folder a leaden worry in his hands.
But you're incredibly busy, and full disclosure, I had no idea that I'd made such a potentially dangerous enemy.
He said quietly, his eyes staring out of the window to his left, his frown deepening.
I'd hoped I was making things better. But surely, so many people coming to your defense shows that you well and truly are my friend.
The bronzed fighter argued.
They're all very kind.
He admitted, Kimiko's face flashing across his mind's eye.
And it's probably wrong of me to ask you this, and please, if it's too personal, there's no need to answer.
He heard himself say, his hands now gripping the folder.
How? What can you do when you're unable to save everyone?
Allowing a chuckle that sounded more sad than strained to leave him, almost hummed in the back of his throat.
At my experience, you need to focus on your victories.
He reasoned.
And reflecting on what you could have done differently without dwelling on it too is useful, well, in so much that you can try to find ways of saving the next person next time,
He murmured.
It is difficult to realize that regardless of what you or anyone else does, sometimes we face obstacles that can't be overcome so much as sidestepped.
He sighed.
However, moving forward, striving to be there when you're needed, and never giving up whilst keeping a smile,
He said.
That is how my master taught me, and what I hope to pass on as my ultimate legacy.
He offered, those neon eyes flashing at him briefly.
Even though you're not one to smile without due cause, Shouta-kun, I hope that you realize that who you are and what you do has given many people a reason to smile.
He said, a softer smile stretching his lips as he turned the corner and continued to drive them back to the cafe.
And that, my friend, is surely something to be proud of, no?
Getting out of the car, All Might had deeply apologized for allowing Mr. Compress to get away. He'd assured him that such an apology was unnecessary, since all local pros were on the lookout for him anyway. Also, his cafe was secured, and he promised that he'd be careful. He told the other to come by for his cake order at 10, as agreed.
There's no trouble, and besides, the majority have already been made.
He told him before waving him off, to be welcomed back by a relieved Mitsuki, who hugged him tightly whilst her friends marched back to Ingo's apartment to alert the teens of his return. Loud Cloud and Present Mike had asked her to text them when he came back. They and their new associates were still on the hunt for the bastard who'd very nearly delivered him into a situation that he really didn't want to think about. What a night.
Show!
Looking to the courtyard, his full smile returning, he threw his arms open to receive Dabi as the teen, closely followed by Tomura, who he similarly pulled in, rushed to him. Then, after a squeeze, the flame quirk user turned him around to inspect him with a critical eye.
Are you alright?
Where's the fancy-ass prick?
Chuckling, he grabbed the tallest teen's hand whilst placing his other on the quirk decay user's shoulder.
I'm fine. Physically, anyway.
He offered.
How Mr. Compress is sadly still at large.
He sighed, the pair scowling at the news.
That's why I'd like to ask you to stay over for the night, if that's okay with you.
He directed to a blinking, bewildered Tomura.
I'm not saying that you can't handle yourself, but it's getting late, and I'd much rather know that you were here and safe.
He reasoned.
Oh, yeah, sure.
The crimson-eyed boy smiled, his cheeks pinking.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
He replied, his tone relieved.
Dabi, would you mind opening up and helping him to get settled?
He asked.
I need to go and speak with Hitoshi.
He stated, the file in his hand a heavy weight. Sharing a look, they both nodded, and after has passed the flame quirk user's phone to him, he thanked Mitsuki and her friends for their time before walking with the older, quietly chatting woman back to the apartment block. One of her friends was going to patrol around the area until the early morning, just in case, and she was going to bed down at the Midoriya's. God, what a night.